When Jeff comes home, Chapter 6. Stevens made the arrangements by phone for us to stay in a suite at the San Francisco Hilton. We formed a two-car tandem for the 3-hour commute to the city, Stevens leading the way. I was silent the entire time, sunk in disbelief that I had broken so easily to his questioning. As soon as we hit town, Stevens insisted I go to the FBI building with him. He directed Dad to stay at the Hilton to get the family settled, which I figured was a ploy to get me alone again. The FBI offices are over there, Stevens said, maneuvering his way through the late afternoon weekend traffic. See? That skyscraper that looks like black steel. There should be a few people working today, but it won't be crowded. I don't care, I said tightly. Stevens pulled into the underground parking garage connected to the FBI building that motored into a space marked with his name. I know I pushed you hard back at the house, he said as we got out of the car. I hope you understand why I did it. Sure, you wanted to teach me a lesson or some other shit like that. No, he said, staring at me over the top of the car. No, Jeff, I didn't want to teach you a lesson in particular. You wanted to scare me then? Stevens nodded, a touch reluctantly. I wanted to shock you into telling the truth. I'm sorry I had to do it that way. You liked doing it. I could tell, I shot back at him. You had your hands all over me. He watched me for a moment, expressionless, then took off walking through the lot. After a moment, I followed him. Stevens' office was cluttered but organized. His desk was stacked high with folders divided into neat piles and metal filing cabinets as tall as I was lined one wall. The wall opposite held posters of missing children, tacked up in space so neatly they resembled a mural. I approached the wall with a sick fascination, stopping when I saw myself there, the same poster I had seen on the convenience store window. I stared at the poster, absorbing the details I could not before. The boy in the poster was blond, clean-cut, grinning widely and wearing a blue polo shirt that I suddenly remembered as my favorite from that year. He weighed 120 pounds, stood 5'6" and had a small scar on his right hand. I fingered that scar absently. Charlie had accidentally slammed a car door on my hand once, until I sensed Stephen's presence behind me. We're going to have to list you as found now, he said, sounding happy. I stepped around him carefully, heading for a battered green couch by the door. At the last moment, I realized I did not want Stevens towering over me again, so I perched on the arm of the couch. Did you know Ray was bringing you back? Stevens asked, leaning against his desk now, all business. I shook my head. He didn't tell me where we were going or why. Did he drop you off right away, or did he hang around for a while? I stiffened. What do you mean, hang around? Why does that upset you, Jeff? Stevens opened his eyes wide. It doesn't, I flared. Just, he left me in Wayne, okay? That's all. Stevens pointed at me. Ray didn't just leave you and drive off. He stayed around long enough to drop off your clothes, the same clothes you were wearing when you disappeared. I almost laughed. Yeah, I know. Did you know he was going to do that? No. I shifted, feeling prickles of heat up and down my arms. I came here to look through photos of you. Through photos for you. Don't ask me anything else. Eventually, you'll have to say what happened between you and Ray. You might as well start now. Nothing happened. He kidnapped me. That's all. Why did he kidnap you? Stevens asked. You told your dad Ray wanted a traveling companion. Is that true? I stared at him, betrayed. Goddamn Dad. Look, I understand that you're embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed, I said through gritted teeth. I have no reason to be embarrassed. Stevens nodded. That's true. You have no reason to be embarrassed. I hope you'll understand that one day. I looked away from him, confused. Stevens stood, gesturing toward a stack of papers on his desk. My assistant pulled these mugshots for us. All of the men have been arrested for kidnapping a child within the last 10 years in California, and all of them roughly match your description of Ray. I want you to go through them carefully, all right? He waited for my nod. I'm going to go out and play with the computers for a while. Give me a yell when you're done. Once Stevens was out of the room, I hesitated, feeling a strange reluctance to delve into the pile, as though seeing all the men would make me a part of what they had done. I looked carefully at the first dozen or so photos, but soon the staring dark eyes, black hair, and blank faces began to run into one another. Only an especially bizarre-looking man or an inappropriate expression made me look twice. Halfway through, I came to a convict who'd bared his teeth for the camera in an unconvincing imitation of a grin, his eyes half-lidded and head tilted back. I flipped the photo up and read the crime sheet clipped to the back. The man had been convicted of kidnapping and raping his 5-year-old nephew. I threw the picture down on Stephen's desk, sickened. I read the rap sheets of the next 5 men. All had served time for sexual crimes as well as kidnapping. I stood motionless for a moment, then swept the pictures off the desk, knocking over 2 of Stephen's folders in the process. My fury turned to fear when I saw the mess I had created. I knelt, grabbing the papers off the floor, my heart racing as I watched for Stevens. Without looking at the stack of papers I had collected, I divided it in half, placing each section randomly inside the folders. Next, I picked up the mugshots, tapped them into a neat pile, and set them back in the center of Stevens' desk. When Stevens returned 15 minutes later, I was sitting on the arm of the couch just as he had left me. "Through already?" he said after a moment. "I didn't recognize anyone," I said flatly. "How hard did you look?" "Why is every man in there some kind of sick rapist pervert?" I stumbled over my words. "I told you Ray isn't like that." "I think he is," Stevens said calmly. "The longer I'm around you, the more strongly I believe that." I dared to look at him. "You think you know me. You're wrong." "Actually," Stevens said, "I don't know you, but I do know guys like Ray." Our eyes held for a moment, and then I looked away. Our suite at the Hilton was near the top floor. Connie and Dad had set up in the master bedroom with Charlie, Brian, and I ranged out in the spacious living room. I flopped into the daybed by the window, far away from where the others would sleep. Charlie chose one of the long velvet couches, and Brian settled onto the rollaway cot. After Connie triple-locked the door, even setting a chair against it, she hugged Brian, wished Charlie good night, and came over and stood by my bed. I knew she was waiting for a signal from me, but I kept my eyes closed. Finally, Connie kissed me lightly on the forehead. I restrained myself from wiping it off, but I turned over and buried my head in the pillow. "Good night. Turn off the goddamn lights." After a moment, she did, retreating to the room where Dad and Stevens were discussing my performance. I wrapped my pillow around my head so I wouldn't hear anything, blanking out Charlie's voice calling softly to me.